All right. Good morning, folks. Welcome to Coffee with Artists. My name is Rachel Wilkins. Delighted to be here this morning. I have an overseas guest joining me this morning, so very excited about that. Matthew Dols, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And I just want to tell everybody a little bit about you. I'll give you a formal introduction before we officially jump in. Matthew is an associate professor of photography at the University of Maryland's Global Campus and currently lives in Prague in the Czech Republic. He received his MFA from the University of San Francisco Art Institute and a BFA from the Corcoran School of Art and Design, and has some work exhibited in the private collection of the Museum of Modern Art, which is quite an accomplishment. So that's
No, it's not the museum. It's the Met.
I'm sorry, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Forgive me. Well, that's quite a resume to start off with. So, welcome. How are you holding up out there in Prague?
It's love. The pandemic is waning here. The quarantine is sort of they're loosening the grip on it, so we have a little bit more freedom of movement, and we can start meeting in larger groups and things like this. So we've gotten through, I believe, the worst of this first wave of it.
Mm. So Matthew and I actually connected, right in the middle, well, kind of right when this really started. Matthew also has a podcast, The Wise Fool. I encourage folks to go check that out. Little plug there. We discussed, a variety of ways that, the art world is responding to this moment right now. As somebody who does live in Eastern Europe and has had the opportunity to really have a broad perspective of what's happening, both through your own lived experience out in the Czech Republic, but also interviewing a lot of different voices from the art world. What has been your kind of key takeaway from how people are responding to this moment?
Creative people will always find a way. I believe we're sort of the instigators of change. We're the people that think about the next big thing, the next best thing, the whatever, and so we will find a way through this. However, right now I think it's still a lot in flux because there are so many extraneous elements that are still very, very unknown. Be it the economy itself, just the nature of galleries. Will they be able to stay open? I've been hearing things about museums, potentially not being able to keep their doors open due to funding problems. So it's the question of just how long is it going to last, and how deep an impact it's going to have. Because I personally don't believe that one wave is going to be it. I think we're going to get hit again in the autumn winter period, and it's going to, exacerbate the entire situation, I'm sure, a lot more. But I think that the creative industries will survive. The question is sort of what's the new paradigm going to look like?
I think there'll be a lot of reorganizing, and unfortunately, probably a lot of lost jobs in that process.
Yes, but I mean, in some ways, I'm a little bit. The one thing I'm most afraid of is that it goes back to the way it was. Because it inherently, the arts world has been a little bit broken here and there, and so the idea that this will create some sense of change is kind of exciting in many ways.
Do you think we have the opportunity in this moment for the art world to become a more democratic place?
We always have that opportunity, and the problem is that we're not the ones that can control whether or not it's the problems is it's the arts world. I feel like is very much of a caste system. Like there's the blue chips, the prestige places, all this kind of stuff, and then on the opposite side of that caste system are the working artists, and we don't get to make the decisions. We're the ones who just pretty much make the products and sort of listen to or follow or choose not to follow whatever's being passed down to us through the hierarchy of the caste.
Those pesky gatekeepers.
I know. I feel like I'm going to get in so much trouble for things I'm about to say, but okay.
That's all right. It's fine. It's not live. No.
Yes, not at all. There's not already people commenting and like,
No,
oh my
no.
God.
Good morning, everybody. Good to see everyone. Just a little heads up that we will take some questions from Matthew at the end of this session. So if you do have any questions that come up, add them into the comments, and we will most definitely get to them as we close things out. So you're somebody.
It's nice to see people listening from Arizona, UK. I see there's a bunch of people. It's really great.
We're like the United Nations this morning here. Look at this.
It's lovely. Thank you all for listening. I hope I'm somewhat interesting.
So I have my good old faithful black coffee. Matthew informs me that he's not a coffee drinker, but smoking. Wait, tell me you tell me your little tea story. You have an Indian tea that you start your day out with.
I did. When I was living in Abu Dhabi in the Middle East, in the United Arab Emirates, they used to have a drink called karak, which I believe is Indian. And it's this magnificent tea that it takes them like 12 hours to steep the tea. And it's just absolutely magnificent. They do fresh cardamom and cinnamon and like, it's just lovely. But these days, I'm in Prague. I can't get Indian karak, so now I'm doing I do English breakfast with a buckwheat honey.
Very nice.
Love the buckwheat honey. Huge fan. It tastes like a mix between honey and molasses. It's
very nice. So you're somebody who has moved around a little. I think that's fair to say.
A lot.
You are currently an associate professor at the Maryland University, their global campus. You do teach from abroad. Tell us about that experience. Tell us, first of all, what took you to Prague, which is a beautiful city for anybody who hasn't visited. It's definitely worth checking out. Do not go in the winter. It's freezing.
No. Actually, Christmas is stunning here. They do beautiful Christmas markets all around. It's really, really beautiful. My first visit here was actually at Christmas time, and it's absolutely magical in the historic areas at Christmas time. And summertime is nice, but they don't have a lot of air conditioning in this country, so I'm not super fan of necessarily the summertime is the best time to come here. So spring and autumn, gorgeous. I love those.
I was there in the winter right before the Christmas holidays, and all those beautiful markets, but the fog was so low that if you put your hand like this in front of your face, you could not see your hands. It was eerie but beautiful, mystical experience. It was really lovely.
Yeah, it's winter. I love the winter sort of festivities that go on here, and then, from here, of course, I go to like Vienna, I go to like Austria and Germany and places like this where they're winter markets, and they're absolutely exquisite.
See, that's what I miss about Europe. I miss being able to just hop around countries. That's not quite the same in the States. I mean, you can travel across country. It takes you to 6 hours to travel just across this country. So I certainly miss that about Europe for sure.
Well, I mean, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I could have gotten on a train and been in New York in less than 4 hours, but I rarely did it.
Right.
Whereas here in Europe, getting on a train going 4 hours, some people, that's their daily commute. It's no big deal here to do that. So it's a very different culture.
So what took you out to Prague?
I ended my tenure teaching at Zayed University in Abu Dhabi, and I was not, no place was calling me, basically. No place was saying, hey, come here. So, and my wife is Czech. And so we just said, well, why don't we just go to the Czech Republic for a little while, use that as a sort of a bouncing off point, and we'll see where we go from here. We may stay here and build a house outside of town, or we may leave for warmer cultures, warmer environments. We're still up in the air on that. My wife is finishing up her master's degree right now. So when she's done with that, then some decisions will be made.
Nice. So, having these kind of three very contrasting living experiences from the U.S., growing up in Virginia, to Abu Dhabi, to Prague, what have been the contrasts? What have been the parallels? What do you miss about U.S. culture? What would you miss about this culture? Give us a little perspective.
Wow. Well, you have to take into a little bit of consideration that in the United States, while I grew up on the East Coast, and I'm definitely an East Coast boy, I also went to school in Iowa, San Francisco. and I also taught in Ohio and North Carolina. So like I've sort of made my rounds around the United States as well as then doing studies. I did studies in the UK and in Belize prior to my own moves. And also at one point in my life, my father was a tour guide in Turkey. So on his holidays, he would take tours through Turkey because he's a reverend minister. Not sure everybody's thing, reverend
Mhm.
priest, and he would take people on the following the footsteps of Saint Paul through Turkey. And so that was also a trip that I did, I think, 2 times with him as well. So my parents didn't travel a lot as when they were young, and so when I was young and my brother was young, they offered us a lot of worldly experiences. They basically just said, "Get out, see as much as you can before you have to settle down." So I've taken every opportunity to do everything I can do to try and experience as much as I can experience, so that I could be as well informed as I could
Mm.
be. And some of it has been to my benefit, some of it has been to my detriment. um, so yeah. But you asked about differences and things I miss and things like that. There are really, really stupid things that I miss about the US, like Velveeta. I know that's a random thing. You don't know what it is?
No.
The processed cheese spread,
Oh,
the Velveeta?
God. Okay.
Yeah. Can't get it in Europe, can't get it in the Middle East. Nobody, I mean, it's purely an American thing.
Mm,
I mean, a lot of it's more like brands and products more so
mm,
than like the people. I mean, the American culture has never been a huge supporter of the arts.
mm,
So I've always felt like an outsider in America across the board. I mean, in art school and teaching in an arts, well, even to know in an art school. So like Corcoran and San Francisco Art Institute, it was great. There was this beautiful bonding that we all were there together. We were all going through the same thing. And then when I went and taught at like universities, the arts is always sort of the bottom of the barrel. The teachers are paid the least. They're given the worst, lowest quality resources and facilities of the university. So that whole sort of uh, love hate relationship with the arts in the United States is not really my thing. So I ended up in the Middle East because, well, they offered me a job,
mm.
and I thought it would be an amazing adventure. I was like, "Oh my god, that's gonna be so cool." I remember thinking like it's gonna be like a National Geographic, and like I was gonna, it's be exotic and all this, and not in the United Arab Emirates. It's not at all. It's glitz and glamour and posh and showy and superficial. So it's not at all what I had hoped it would be.
Mm.
But they paid really, really well.
Well, that's good.
Oh yeah.
We like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, a job like that, working as an expat in a country like the United Arab Emirates, is one of those few times in your life that, as an artist or as a professor or anything like that, that you actually will be making a very good living.
Mm,
It
interesting.
was it was ridiculous. They put me up as a single person when I first took the job. I was a single man, and they gave me a two-bedroom apartment on the 52nd floor of a high rise that had 3 swimming pools, 2 tennis courts, 2 gyms, a Waitrose, and an entire mall in the building. So,
Wow,
like, I never even had to leave the building. It was completely self-sufficient community. It was Oh, and they paid for all that.
that's wild.
Yeah, it was insane. Like, they paid my housing, so I didn't even have to pay that, so my salary was on top of that. It was just ridiculous.
So you've had experiences of teaching, in the classroom, and now obviously ultimately teaching online. What are, uh, some of the benefits? What are some of the challenges? Because I think we're seeing a lot of institutions that are probably going to go down this path of online learning. What are you seeing, and what's kind of been your experience with both of those methods of teaching?
The In classroom, I felt like I had a lot more freedom to sort of teach the way I wanted to teach with very little oversight. When you teach online, the administration and your bosses and your deans and whatever have a lot more access to sort of exactly what's going on in your classroom, and so there's a lot more oversight. My particular situation with the University of Maryland global campus is it's a standardized course, and many different professors teach the same course. Like this semester, there are 12 different teachers teaching the same course. So the course is standardized, and I can just throw in my own little 2 cents and my own little parts into it. But it doesn't allow for as much sort of creative freedom. So it's tough because with all the schools that are sort of transitioning into going online teaching, they're going to either give, if they give the professors a lot of room to build their own thing, on the one hand, it could be really, really amazing and they can come up with astounding, unique courses to run, or it could be an exponentially ton of work on their part to have to build everything from scratch and then figure out what they did right and what they did wrong and how to do it better next time. And so like it's difficult to just jump into it and do it fresh. So
Mm.
like I enjoy the fact that to a certain extent I don't have to concern myself too much with the course because it is a standardized course. But on the other hand, I very much miss the um even just the body language of being able to like just look at the student and talk to the student and hear their tone of voice. Like all I get is typed responses
Mm.
on the computer, and so it's I, I can't tell if somebody's being happy, polite, rude, or if they're even understanding what I'm saying. So I mean, because we all lie when we type things. We're like, "Yes, this is great, LOL," but we're not laughing out loud. Like, I mean, so like, we all lie in that
Mm.
shit.
Right.
We all get really angry and then we come back to it and we say, "Yes, thank you very much for your feedback."
Yeah.
But 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 we're not really
Angry
thanking you.
birds.
Yeah. So it's very different.
Mm.
Do I think that they're getting the same education though would be no, they're not. It's a different
Mm.
education. It might be better for some people, because it gives them a little bit more leeway, a little bit more time. They can do it in their own leisure time instead of having to sit in a particular classroom at a particular time, kind of
Mm.
thing. Um, but yeah, I think it's at the moment it's still missing some things that could be added in or expanded on, but that will come in time.
I wonder if with, things like Zoom, which is kind of blown up here. I wish I had Zoom stock before all this happened, but
Mm.
with the technologies like Zoom, and I know Facebook is now on the bandwagon with Facebook Rooms, that we have this software to maybe have more of an interactive experience. Maybe that might be something that could be applied to learning.
People are trying it and I've seen it. I can't imagine doing it. I mean,
Mm.
in a classroom, it's hard enough to keep the attention of 15 to 20 people. I can't imagine. I mean, I barely am paying attention to myself talking right now. So, like, I can't imagine 15 to 20 people trying to listen and me trying to keep their interest in what's going on. And so, I mean, it may go the direction of more individual education.
Mm.
So, like more, sort of weekly one-on-ones kind of things. But then the problem with this is that the academic infrastructure would probably have to change to accommodate that because doing things like that would be exponentially more time and effort on the professor's side because if I had to meet with 20 students one-on-one, 30, 20 of them every week for 30 minutes, that's still 10 more hours than I was putting in before. So it's a difficult balance. And I mean, the pay might have to change, like how much teachers are paid.
Mm.
I don't know. I am not in the administration. I've never wanted to be in the administration. I've been asked to be an assistant dean and a dean, and I'm like, absolutely not. Under any circumstances will I ever do an administrative job like that. So, yeah.
So let's go way back. Let's go back to Arlington, Virginia. For those that don't know, this is a small place that sits right outside of Washington D.C., very very close. Um, Tell us about those early days as the son of a minister and an interior designer. How did you navigate that as a creative person? What was growing up like, and what drew you to the medium of photography?
Um, so much to unpack in that question.
We can do it piece. We can go piece by piece.
Yeah, I mean, being a PK in and of itself, a preacher's kid,
Mm,
is its own set of issues because generally children of ministers are either angels or devils. That's it. There's no in between generally. Um, my brother was the lesser of those two, and so I, by default, fell into the role of the better, but by no stretch of the imagination am I good. Um, my brother, I was better than my brother. That's it. It's not great. There were definitely other PKs that were substantially more angelic than I was for sure. I mean, I almost got kicked out of high school. I actually did get kicked out of my first college. Like, I mean, I was a hellion when I was young. I mean, I was doing drinking and doing drugs and all kinds of crazy, insane things in my youth. Um, yeah, my parents were very tolerant for sure of the absurdity of my life. How did I come to doing photography? My first memory of photography is going to sound really weird when I try to explain this. When I was a kid, I used to hide in closets. I felt that they were very comfortable. Like I would literally like close the door in the closet on the floor, and I just enjoyed being in them. And one day I remember being in the closet and I was digging through my dad's bag that he keeps in his closet, and I found his old camera. There actually was a camera that was gifted to my parents on their as a wedding gift that he hadn't used in decades. And I pulled it out and remember asking him, "Hey, what's this? How does this work?" Yada, yada, yada. And at the same time, my older brother was in photography class in high school. He was 6 years older than me, and he was in photography class. So when my dad saw that I had an interest in the camera and my brother was taking classes, my dad ended up, well, I shouldn't say my dad, my parents ended up building a dark room in our basement for my brother, and I, of course, then hung out in there. And so that would be the first inclination towards it. I mean, but you gotta understand, my mother's an interior decorator, so she's got, great color sense and good all the, decorative kind of stuff. My father, even though he's a minister, he actually had, his bachelor's degree was in art.
mm,
So he was actually a painter and he did printmaking and things like this. And so he's been doing creative things his entire life. So even though he was a minister, he would also like I remember being a kid and we used to do silk screening all the time for the church. We would do silk screen posters, silk screen T-shirts, all kinds of silk screen everything. It was the late 70s, so bear with that. But so creativity was around my house for sure. My parents are extremely eclectic when it comes to that kind of stuff. They have this weird art collection that, of course, I love because I grew up with it, but nobody else would love it but a family member.
What was some of the pieces that you can recall?
Oh, Leonard Baskin's "Man of Peace" is the one that sat out. It's a life-size woodblock print of a man holding a horse head. It was outside of my bedroom for my entire childhood, so like I grew up with that. My dad had a print of a Chagall in the bathroom. Not not a great. It wasn't a painting or anything. It was a print. It's no big deal. But he had that in the bathroom, so that was his bathroom art. Was a Chagall. So I mean, it's just really random things like this. We have a Calder print. We have this beautiful. Oh my gosh! When my let's see, my father's parents passed away, we went and cleaned out their house, and in the laundry room, I pulled a book down, and this thing fell out of the book, and we're all thinking it's money. We're like, yeah, everybody stores money in books, and it turned out it was a map of Jerusalem done in like 1492 on papyrus.
Wow.
And we ended up going through all the books. There were I think 2 or 3 of these maps, and they're ridiculously like amazing. And they ended up having them framed, and they're like in the living room. They're just absolutely stunning.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's
big fan
incredible.
of that. Yeah, random things like that. But also, Yeah, on a side note, my father's twin brother was named Michael, and Michael was a professor at Oxford specializing in medieval Islamic medicine.
That's so random.
Absolutely. And and one day, and when he was like 40 years old, he picked up a pencil and started drawing, and he was the most amazing natural illustrator. He can just like sit in front of a building and do magnificent, detailed architectural drawings that looked like photographs just by looking, no training whatsoever. Always pissed me off. Like, because I can't do that to save my life. And I went through art school for like 8 years.
So it sounds like you have this lineage of artists and educators in your family.
Oh yeah, my dad, the other one that always upsets me is my father. He can pick up any musical instrument and play it in 15 minutes. Even if he's never seen it before, never heard of it, doesn't know what it is, give him 15 minutes, he can play a song on it. Freaking annoys me.
So you have this yearning for creativity, but you also spent some time on the road as a roadie. Tell us about that experience.
That experience. Wow. Okay. So it was, I think it was 19. So I'm trying to think of what it was and when it was. 98 that I went there. So it was 1995 or so. And I was looking for a new job, and I literally like looked in the want ads back in the newspaper for all the young kids. That's the newspaper that used to be delivered to the door in the mornings. And there literally was an ad that just said, "Do you want to work in rock and roll?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah, I want to work in rock and roll." So I called them up, and it was a staging company, and they did stages and lights and sound, and I ended up doing that, and I ended up by the end of that run of my career of about 4 or 5 years, I went through being addicted to heroin, cocaine. I worked for Lollapalooza, the HF Festival in DC, Rocky Gap Country Festival. My home base was the 930 Club in Washington D.C., and so like if I didn't have a job on the road, I would just work at the 930 Club, which was amazing. Love those people, and we were the craziest. I owned a used 1981 BMW, silver exterior, red leather interior. It sounds much more posh than it really was. It was not, and we called it the disco ball. And
Oh
so
my
like where me and my friends Enrique and Quentin and whoever else was in the car, we would just roll in and just dominate and do the job. I mean, we used to get pulled over by police, and we would talk our way out of tickets, and we were the worst. But it was such a good time. I mean, those were I worked with, the Beastie Boys, Pearl Jam, Chemical Brothers, God, who's Chicago, Lenny Kravitz.
God.
I mean, like anybody that was touring around the United States between like 1995 and 2000, I pretty much worked with them.
Wow.
It was great fun. Great. I mean, I wish I could tell more stories. Unfortunately, I was so high that I don't remember most of the stories. I do remember one time we did a festival in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, where Chicago was playing. And our boss was this lady, Jackie, who was this amazing woman. This woman was the head rigger for the Olympics in Atlanta. Like, I mean, she was a freaking tough woman. And she told us, she said, "Okay, we're all going out to Rehoboth Beach, Delaware to do this job. Chicago's playing. And by the way, all of you big burly men that work for me, you all must wear dresses."
Hmm.
So we all were on the road, and we all had to go to a shopping mall and find dresses that fit us to wear while we were working as
Yeah,
roadies. So the entire festival, all the roadies were in drag.
that's amazing.
It was so much fun. It was the funniest part was when one of the guys that I was with was like, "Oh, who's that hot girl over there? Oh, look at her." And then she turned around, it was one of our coworkers. It was not a girl at all.
Oh no.
So that was very fun. Yeah,
Uh, well, I'm sure you have many, many stories that you could tell
I
about that
do.
life on
Yeah.
the road.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
Lenny Kravitz was my very first concert when I was 11 years old. I saw him at Earl's Court in London, and he was amazing.
Oh, he puts on a great show.
So awesome.
Yeah, I
So
was really sad when I worked with him. Happened to be the time when I was very much into smoking pot, and it happened to be the exact moment that he quit smoking pot. So that was sad.
so you said you battled drug addiction, like this was a real issue for you. What kind of closed that chapter for you?
Well, I'm not going to say battled, but I mean, I definitely made some interesting choices in my life for sure. And what closed it for me was when it was Christmas Eve, 1999, and there's this tradition in my dad's church that he did the midnight mass, and the midnight mass was oftentimes when the younger parishioners would sort of come together and sort of reconnect after being away at school or work and just not seeing each other. And we got there, and I was, of course, doing lines of cocaine in the car before I went in. And I got in there, and my old friend Elizabeth Crocker, who I'd known since, well, I think since she was born, and at this point I was probably 29, 28, something in that range. And she turns to me and just says, "So Matt, how you doing with your cocaine use?" And I was just like, "I'm sorry, wait, what? How do you even know about that? I don't live here. I don't hang out with anybody from here. I don't do drugs with anybody from here. There's absolutely no reason why she should know about that." And she just goes, "Oh, we all know."
Mm.
And she just like waves her hand across everybody, and everybody in the room is looking at me, and I'm like,
No.
"Are you fucking kidding me? Like, how do you all know about this thing that I've tried really hard to hide from you all?" And I said, "Well, why haven't you all like done an intervention or said anything or tried to help me?" And she just said, "Because we know you, and you'll find your way when it's right for you."
Mm. Wow.
And and I was just like, fuck. So I went home that night, and I basically was just like, all these people in my life have more faith in me to make the right choices than I obviously had for myself at that time. So I just said, "Forget it." I quit, and I stopped.
That must have been a powerful moment.
It was very actually, once the resolution came around, it was pretty easy.
Mm. It's making that decision.
It was, yeah, I mean, because like there were some tough times leading up to that. I mean, a friend had overdosed about 3 months before then. I got very, very close. It turns out, and I didn't even know this at the time, but it turns out I was being investigated by the DEA. They actually had me under video surveillance, because it turns out that one of the guys I worked with at the 930 Club, that his cousin was the DEA agent who was surveilling me. And so he told his cousin, he's like, "Hey, stay away from that guy, Matt, and his friends Quentin and all that, because we're surveilling them for a drug
Wow.
sting." So I was like, "You know what? This is the right time for me to get out." So I got out, and luckily I didn't get arrested.
Your life could have took a very different turn.
Oh, very. Yes. It would have been very hard to be a professor at a university if I had a drug conviction on me.
Mhm. For sure. So let's
So
talk about your practice. So how would you describe your work today, and how has it evolved over the years?
how would I describe my work today? I am having a very difficult time with that. People keep asking me, because I'm a photography based artist. So everything starts with a photograph in some way. So if you look through my work, you'll see lots of manipulations and reconstructions and deconstructions, sort of taking things apart, putting too many things, whatever, with photographs. Very few of my works are purely just photographic, but I'm using photography. So these days, what I've come to is I had a revelation one time. Well, revelation, whatever. I had a insight into my idea, was just I was out doing these photo shoots, and I was building and building. So I was constructing these things, finding locations. I was actually having wardrobes custom made for photo shoots. Like, I was going very, very high art, sort of creating these things. And then it suddenly dawned on me. I was like, why do I need all that? Like, and so like how much can I deconstruct and how much can I remove from that while still expressing the same idea? And so that then went back, has stepped back. So like now I'm doing thing where this is about 3 years old now, but it's I build up these images and I make them as beautiful or as evocative or as expressive as I can, and then I try to basically figure out what are the core elements to it that I can take away while still holding on to the original intention of the idea. So I do everything from silver leaf, sanding the paper itself away, sanding away the image, painting over the image, and also doing like sort of, I hate saying it, but like a decoupage, sort of layering of tissue paper to create a sort of almost like a skin on top of the image. So there's now an additional texture, additional um, transparency, sort of almost luminescence sort of going through it. And so it's about sort of trying to deconstruct the image and find out what's necessary to
Mm.
continue to have it be interesting.
What is the intent behind it? What do you hope the viewer experiences or takes away?
Fuck, that's a hard question. What do I want people? Um, for me, the layering and all the other stuff is it's all about how much I'm comfortable with people knowing about me
Mm.
and how much I want to hide. So in many ways, I'm an open book and I'll tell you great, funny stories, but I won't cry with you.
Mm.
So like there's certain things that I'm perfectly good with telling, showing, expressing to people, and there's certain things that I generally keep private and I keep to myself, for better or for worse. I mean, maybe I should be more open and vulnerable. And so about part of it is about being vulnerable. Like how vulnerable is the right amount of vulnerability and how much is too much and how much is too little. um, I mean, I'm utterly petrified of people that think they understand me because I'm not sure I understand me.
Mm.
So, um, yeah, so that a lot of it's about being vulnerable, fear of vulnerability, um, wanting to be hidden or protected, these kinds of things.
I think vulnerability, and I always struggle to say that word for some reason. Vulnerability and creative expression are one and the same, right? It's such a vulnerable act to not only put your thoughts, emotions, feelings, desires, passions onto canvas or through a lens, but to then hang them on the wall and have folks, invited or uninvited, give you their opinion. How have you reckoned with that over time as a creative showing your work when it is something that seems, what I'm getting from you is it's somewhat a cathartic experience? It's where you express your soul. And I'm going deep now, Matthew.
I hate the term cathartic because it goes back to I have this pet peeve that people like say like, well, art is an expression and it's a creative, like it's my outlet. Like,
Mm.
eh.
You
Uh,
disagree?
I mean, I guess on the most basic of senses, I do agree, but it's oftentimes some like hippy dippy, feel good, new agey person that's saying it to me, and so I'm sort of like, I'm going to disagree with you just on the fundamentals that I just disagree with you about everything else.
Is it just
So
because it's so cliche?
pretty much, yeah. Like, I mean, who wants to be a cliche? I don't want to be a cliche.
Mm.
So why would I agree with a cliche statement? No, I'm going to make my own cliche statement. But
I'm,
I'm the one that start it.
I'm sensing a little rebellion in your spirit, Matthew.
Absolutely. I mean, the last thing I want to be is just like anybody else.
And isn't that cliche in and of itself?
Quite possibly.
But let's
Yeah.
talk about that moment when you do hang that work up and you have somebody offering their invited or uninvited opinion. What is it? What does that do? What do you feel in that moment?
I generally am not there. I'm my enjoyment is the putting it up and making it available. Like, so I love hanging an exhibition and making the exhibition look beautiful and a great experience. so that there's a nice flow to it. Big work, small works, this kind of stuff. Like so that as you walk around the room, you sort of understand more about what the intention of the work is. The more you take in, kind of thing. Like I love that kind of curatorial process.
Mm.
Um, I I personally think the exhibitions are not they're not the point. An exhibition to me is a stopping point. It basically just says, okay, as of today, this is where I am. Now I'm going to go back into the studio tomorrow and I'm going to make more. So like it's just a stopping point saying like, hey, this is where I am today. Um, any feedback so that when I go back to the studio tomorrow that I can, make it better. But generally, I find most exhibitions to just be glad handing, family, patronizing you, saying like, "Oh, this is so beautiful, I love it." But the greatest honor for me, of course, is when somebody decides to purchase a
Mhm.
work. Like when somebody says, "I want to own this, put it into my home or my business and my life, and I want to see this thing on a regular basis, and I want to then pass it down to my children and all this kind of stuff." Like that is the greatest honor for me, more so than just hanging it on the wall. I mean, hanging it on the wall, we can do that anywhere.
Right. It's an investment in you, not just the work.
Well, I mean, if somebody goes through all the emotional experience, like because I've bought artwork in my life as well, and so like when I buy artwork, I want to love it. I really want to enjoy it. I want to think it's not only beautiful today, but I'll think like 20 years from now when I look at it again, it's still beautiful, and there's something still interesting about it. So like it continues to resonate with me throughout my life, and then theoretically my children's, and so on. So the idea that somebody else was so impacted by things that I create, that is amazing to me, more so than just somebody coming up and saying, "Hey, beautiful exhibition."
Mm. So tell me a little bit about this series, The Sentimentalist. One of the things that I noticed when I was looking at this series is that the figures, which are predominantly women, they appear to be emerging, but they never quite reveal themselves. So there's a little bit of mystique, ambiguity there. Tell us about that series, how that came to light, and talk a little bit about the kind of male gaze on the female form.
Wow. Okay, I haven't okay, so I have to give you a little bit of context for that. I haven't spoken about that series in its true form in a long time because while I was in the United Arab Emirates, I was not allowed to talk about a lot of things, and as a matter of fact, had to take a lot of my artwork off of my website um, in order to have my job there, because this is a Muslim country, so like certain things couldn't be done there. So okay, to be the most blunt and open and vulnerable
Mm,
about this. So I was living in Ohio, teaching at Bowling Green State University campus, and it was a very lonely place. And I was single, and I was introduced to the work of Idris Khan. And his layering techniques that he did early in his career, and I said, like, his technique is amazing. I absolutely adore his work, and I still do to this day. But at the time, it was very impactful on me, and I thought, well, what? How can I sort of utilize that technique of layering and layering and layering? Because he would do like the entire a book of the Quran. He would flip every single page and take a picture of every single page, and then layer it all up into one image of the entire Quran. Like so, is that kind of thing? Um, so the idea was basically like, how can I use that sort of figuratively? So like instead of to do it deeply conceptually the way he did it, to actually do it with an intention of making something somehow beautiful out of the technique. And at the time, again, I was single and I was in Ohio, which is a very depressing place to be. And I was looking at a lot of online pornography at the time, quite honestly, and I found that the online pornography was very blunt and very graphic and very sort of in your face and no pun intended, sort of just bold and all this kind of stuff. So what I wanted to do was, it started with the idea of, could I take this very blunt, graphic, sort of bold thing like online pornography and make it beautiful in some way,
Mm.
or make it romantic, or so like taking the contemporary interpretation of nudity and trying to take it back to the like expressionist or impressionist feeling of the human form. And so those images started with me actually downloading softcore pornography, and then layering them up, hundreds and hundreds of layers, and then flattening them down into a single image that was sort of the romanticized, or from the title, the sentimental sort of ideal of a figure in you, but came from resource material that was softcore internet pornography.
Wow. So kind of the exact opposite of Idris Khan's Quran piece.
Pretty much. Yeah, yeah, but using the
Same
same
process.
technique. Yeah, same technique.
So is there a particular piece from that series that really speaks to you, that you is kind of the one where you felt like, okay, this is exactly what I'm trying to say?
No. The reason why I say that is because, first of all, I made about 10,000 of those,
Mm.
because most of them failed miserably, because I had no control over the original source images, so I couldn't, I just had to work with whatever the internet offered to me. So I ended up making nearly 10,000 of those to come up with about 75 really, really strong, evocative ones.
Mm.
And they're all very unique in their own ways, the ways that I couldn't control. Because just to give you an example, so let's say there were 100 pictures in a photo series, right? So I would take only the ones that were vertical, because if they went horizontal and vertical, the whole shape of the form would go wacky. So only vertical. And then I would layer them up. So hundreds and hundreds of layers. Some of them were up to like 700 images.
Mm.
Some of them, you needed at least 50 to get that sort of ghostly effect to them. So minimum of 50, maximum about 700. I would layer them all up, and then I would change the opacity down to just 1%. And then I would flatten the whole thing. And then I would just hit auto tone, auto contrast, auto color in Photoshop. And that's it. And so I made no manipulations.
Mm.
All I did was sort of say like, yes, it worked, or no, it didn't work. And that's it.
Mm.
So do I have some great affinity towards them? I mean, there are some now that, from time and experience, that looking back on them, that I'm like, oh, that one was so good. And like, I remember the first one that turned out well. I really loved that one just because it was the first one.
Mm.
But some of the others now have, memories of where I made them, who I made them of, because it's a long story, but I ended up somehow meeting some of these models as well. But that's another story for another time. But yeah, so and then of course, like when I ended up going to title them, I tried to choose, people from my past, names of people, so that they were somehow sort of depictions of people that I have experiences with in my life. So unfortunately, the viewer, whoever looks at it or buys it, they don't have that relationship. And I'm not going to sit there and be like, hey, this is my ex-girlfriend, she was a bitch, whatever. But I have that by the name that I gave them,
Mm.
through. So oftentimes the images have been named based on experiences that I've had with particular people, whether it be dated or just friends. It could be anybody, but so just people that I've known in my life, that I had experiences that I felt looked like that.
Interesting. Do you find that, or did you find that when you were exhibiting that particular series, that folks would probe to understand, where it came from? And if so, how do you handle those questions?
Well, I started doing it about a year or two before I went to the Middle East, so I really didn't have a lot of time to show it, exhibit it, and explain it prior to, well, not being able to exhibit it and explain it, because at that time I had to I had to lie to them and I had to say, "Oh, no, yeah, these are portraits, like people, and I took them. Yeah, they're mine." Like, no, they're completely appropriated images from the internet that I never even picked up a camera. Now, there's a second set of those that I think is on my website that I call sentimentalist portraits that I did actually intentionally go out and put on particular wardrobes and go to particular locations and shoot those models in those locations with the intention of creating the sentimentalist pieces with it. So it evolved over time from the sort of pornographic beginnings into an intentional idea. So the later ones that are the portraits set, they are I actually did shoot those intentionally, and those people's names are those people.
So if there was one piece, or if you could have one piece be kind of your legacy and have it hang in a museum of your choice in their permanent collection after your death, what would the piece be, and where would
Probably
you want that to be displayed?
it'd probably be the one I'm working on right now, like, because I'm working on like 7 pieces right now. But if I had to choose one thing that'd be my legacy, it would probably be my book that I made, the 20 Days Over 20 Years. It's never been published, but I worked very hard on it for a couple years with a friend of mine, Tim Jones, who designed it and did the graphic design layout. And we actually worked collaboratively on the imagery in it and all this, mostly because it's a tough story. Did you see that series? Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, you want to talk about vulnerable stories? Like that's a very vulnerable, difficult one for me. The book is called 20 Days Over 20 Years, and what it was it was a series of letters that I received and journal entries that I wrote over the course of a relationship that I had with a young lady over 20 years. And over the course of those 20 years, we were only face to face 20 days.
Hmm.
And so the entire relationship pretty much was via letters and journal entries. And so it's all about the ebbs and flows of a relationship as time progresses and choices change and lives go in different directions, closer or farther apart. And it was the thing that I sort of needed to do in my life to put closure to that so that I could move on and free myself to focus on other ideas and other opportunities. So, yeah, did that. Hoped to publish it. Still hope to publish it someday, but it's so hard to explain that I don't even know how to approach pitching it to people.
Hmm. Wow,
So
it sounds very cathartic.
it was very cathartic.
Your
I
favorite
did.
word?
I hate that word, but no, really, the word I hate is cute. I freaking hate that word, but because everything's cute. I mean, a car's cute, a teddy bear's cute, a kid's cute. Like cute means nothing. But anyways, yeah, that process of that project was very cathartic for me because it allowed me to, again, just sort of basically put closure on a relationship in my life. It's like in the whole book, it never mentions her name. And so it's not about her, and it's, for all practical purposes, it's really not about me. It's about the fact that relationships take work, they take time, they ebb and flow. Sometimes you're closer, sometimes you're farther apart. And that's just the nature of it. And there's no happy ending necessarily unless you work towards it.
Mm.
And sometimes the happy ending is to not be together.
Wow. Now, does she know the subject about this piece of work?
To the best of my knowledge, she does not know that this was ever created now.
Mm.
Again, I don't mention her name, so who cares?
Right. Did you ever
Nope.
see Marina Abramovich, the piece where she reunites with her lifelong love on the wall of China? Give me those kind of vibes.
Yeah, it's very much that kind of an idea. It's a very moving story. I mean, because I got to construct it, so of course I made it as impactful and emotional as possible. But in some ways, it makes me look like idiot and it makes me look like an ass sometimes, but that's the nature of relationships. Sometimes you're an idiot, and sometimes you're an ass. That's how it goes.
I think that's going to be the pull quote from this interview.
Yeah, sometimes you're an idiot, sometimes you're an ass. Absolutely. That's my motto. That's why my podcast is called The Wise Fool, because sometimes I'm smart, sometimes I'm stupid.
I like it. All right, folks, we are going to take some questions for Matthew. So if you do have anything that you would like to ask, any burning desires, questions, inquiries, do jump on in. We do have one right here from Emma. So let's go right to that. Emma Worth, good morning or good afternoon. Emma is joining us from my hometown of Liverpool in the UK. Emma asks, when you work on more than one piece at a time, do you do the same amount of work on each in a strict factory type of work method, or pick up the piece you were inspired to touch on that particular day? So talking about process and work ethic.
All right. Okay. First of all, you have to understand that currently my studio is a 2-car garage, which half that, 1 car worthy of that, is just storage of old work. So I have very limited space to work. So I can only work on, I think it's 6 pieces at a time, because that's literally all the amount of space I have to lay down things. Because my work always involves paper and having to dry. So I have to lay it flat to dry. So I only have so much flat surface. So am I always work? I am always working on more than one piece. I never work on just one piece. I mean, even when I was just a photographer and just taking pictures, I would always be working on 2 different projects at the same time. Generally, I do one project that's very, very technical. So it's about materials, or just sort of some beautiful process, very process oriented, material oriented type thing. And then I'll often have another project going at the same time, which is very emotional and vulnerable for me. And so that way, if I'm feeling very emotional, I can work on the emotional project. If I'm feeling not very emotional and very cold and distant or technical or whatever you want to call it, then I would work on the technical project that day. Currently in my studio, as I said, I generally work on 6 to 8 pieces. And to a certain extent, I shouldn't say 6 to 8 pieces. Okay. I actually work on 6 to 8 pieces at any given moment, but I probably have about 12 pieces started. And so I'll just sort of leaf through all the 12 that I have started, and the first 6 that grab me as oh, I know the next thing to do with this one. I know the next thing I need to do on this one. Those are the ones I'll do on that given day until I run out of space. And then I sort of stack them all up again the next day, and whichever ones just sort of had that very obvious next step, those are the next ones that I work on each day.
So do you have a creative practice every single day?
If I had the money for all the art supplies that I ever wanted and never would run out of art supplies, I would be in my studio every day. However, I'm on a budget. And so, I go into the studio as frequently as I can, which is these days is generally every day to 2 days. I rarely go more than 2 days without being in the studio.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Matthew. This wasn't as terrible as we, as you thought it might be going live. This was great.
No. Oh no, I made a complete ass out of myself, but that's fine. That's what I do.
It's raw, it's authentic, it's vulnerable, and even a little cathartic. I'm going to bully you with that word one more time. So let's tell folks where they can learn more about your work, first of all, and then we'll give a shout out to the podcast as well. So what is your website?
My website is simple, which is just my name, MatthewDols.com. So it's MATT, 2 T's, HEWDOLS.com, or mattdols.com. They both go to the same place. And then there's The Wise Fool, the podcast that I'm doing, which is just called wisefoolpod.com. And it is a wide range of people talking about how we can all be successful in our creative endeavors, because there's so many things. I know a lot and Rachel knows a lot, but neither Rachel nor I know everything. And so there are so many different people. I know my world, and she knows her. I have my Venn diagram. She has her Venn diagram. The question is, how can we get them to overlap in some way? And usually it's another person or another industry or another job or whatever. And so it's trying to find those ways to make it so we can all be more successful, because basically I'm trying to stamp out the stigma of starving artists.
Mm-hmm.
I want that not to be part of our language anymore.
Yeah, it's pretty toxic.
Yeah.
Hungry artist, maybe.
No, just artist. I mean, we never hear starving doctor, starving lawyer, starving salesperson. You don't even hear starving waiter or starving bartender or starving barista, but there's a starving artist. Well, fuck
It's
you.
dramatic, and we're dramatic people.
No. It is condescending.
It is condescending. But it goes back to that idea of, you have to be tortured to create. You have to be in duress, or
there are so many ways to be tortured without being broke.
Agreed. We can both speak to that. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Drug use, drinking, like just psychological abuse from family or friends, whatever. I mean, there are so many ways to have problems in your life that have nothing to do with being poor. Right. So artists can be tortured, but not be poor.
Also not encouraging the tortured artist either. So let's lose both of them. How about that? The contented, nourished artist.
But then we would never have like Francis Bacon and like Lucian Freud and like all these great tortured artists, the Kandinskys. Like, I mean, come on, you got to have those.
You can't leave Van Gogh out of that equation.
Yeah, see, I wonder if he was actually tortured or just depressed. Like, because he was just I mean, he had such a lonely life, but made such optimistically beautiful imagery. So, like, not so sure about him. Like, yeah.
You got to be in a certain mental headspace to chop your own ear off.
Well, okay, yeah, that's a different issue completely. Yeah, no, I'm just thinking about his artwork. But Kandinsky, now Kandinsky had problems, specifically with women. But yeah,
it's a pretty common theme of the male artists over the centuries. So
yeah, well, don't get me wrong, white men are horrible. We're horrible people. Like, I mean, we are entitled little spoiled bitches. Like, get over ourselves.
On that happy note, we're going to close it out right there. Your parting words, Matthew.
Lovely.
All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining us for this session. Thank you to Matthew for joining us all the way from Prague. Such a pleasure to have you here. Any parting thoughts you want to leave our audience with?
Absolutely not. Thank you very much.
All right, folks. We'll be back on Monday. Thank you so much for tuning in. That is our show for today. Thanks.